Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. My name is Emma, and I'm a team member here at Bitwarden. And if you couldn't have already guessed, today I am going to be joined by Julian Cohen, who is the Vice President of Security and Chief Information Security Officer at Ocrolus. And I will also be joined by Noah Ablaseau, who is a SysOps Senior Platform and Security Engineer at InMotion Hosting. Thank you both for joining me today. I've got a few questions for you both, but Julian, let's start with you. Many businesses employ two-factor authentication and/or single sign-on, but may not have a password manager. So where does password management fit in that overall picture for you?
Sure. So with credential theft and password reuse being used for account takeover, quickly becoming one of the most commonly used attacks against organizations, we put together a comprehensive program in place for account security. That, of course, includes things like 2FA and SSO and compromised credentials monitoring. But for users' main SSO accounts, or for systems that don't support SSO or 2FA, or other shadow IT systems, or just one-off accounts like the one I had to create to join the conference earlier today, the most effective control is a password manager. My recommendation is always to use a unique and random password for each account. And the easiest way to do this is to have your password manager generate that for you and store it for you and give users a low friction way to keep that all in your browser.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, I could not agree more because I cannot remember what I had for breakfast, so I certainly can't remember unique passwords. Great. So Noah, let's go over to you. Speaking of password managers, when did you know it was time to implement a password manager, and what determining factors led you to choose Bitwarden?
All right. Well, we've been requiring password manager use for some time via KeePass. And over the years, we've identified a number of issues with this kind of personal password management. We had issues with KeePass backups leaving the organization. It was a bit too technical for our non-technical users. And we found that users will often substitute security for convenience when left to their devices, when speaking to the unique passwords for every single credential. When you're not presented with an option to make that easy, it's really easy to just be lazy. So this led us to look for a new solution to implement throughout the organization. We were looking for some key features, including centralized management and storage, administrative oversight, and oversight of administration. And we actually built our own Slack integration for this. And password use is tracking via event logs and enforcing strict requirements for our master password as well. We found this to be a great way to deliver security via Trojan horse, is how I would refer to it, where you present to convenience to users, and they don't really care whether or not they're being secure. It's just easy.
Yeah, that's a great trick. I'll have to remember that one. Thank you for that. All right, back to you, Julian. Getting people to adopt new tools, especially those for security, helps keep companies protected and secure, but does require extra steps from IT and end users. So how do you use SCIM to automatically provision new users, and what are the benefits of that process for organizations?
Sure. So we use SCIM and automatic provisioning just the way Bitwarden recommends. But that's just the start. We also provide training and documentation for users on how to use Bitwarden, and we explain to users, why it's effective, how it keeps their accounts secure, how it's easier than managing passwords in your head or using the same password for a bunch of different accounts. We get a lot of support from our tech ops team at Ocrolus, providing technical support for Bitwarden, using it themselves, and when provisioning new accounts and storing shared credentials, and helping users with any technical support issues that they need.
Great. That sounds awesome. Good to hear. Okay, Noah, back over to you. Kind of a little bit similar question about end user adoption. So password managers obviously provide the biggest benefit when end users use the password manager. So what did you do, and what can other companies do to help encourage end user adoption?
So Bitwarden is we're quite a fan of it, as its built-in audit logging gives us great insight into what's going on in our organization on a day-to-day. But really looking at the problem of getting high user engagement, the way I see it is that well, everyone knows with phishing out there, users are your weakest link in organizational security. So the question is how you approach that issue. In my opinion, understanding your users and their needs is one of the most important parts of getting started with that approach. I don't think that it works to just throw a security option at your staff and hope that they accept it. You need to handhold that whole process. And a key part of that is just understanding your users. I think shadowing is underutilized, gathering feedback from users, leads, and management, really involving as many people as you can in the process, because it's really important. And that's the only way that you can ensure that you can get the kind of buy-in that you need for your organization.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Having such a hands-on approach really feels like kind of the only way to go there. Awesome. Thank you for that. Julian, if I could go back to you for another question. You are someone who has built many security programs at various organizations. So what are a few key factors of creating a successful security program that you could share?
Sure. I think the most important thing is understanding your organization, being able to, figure out where, have a good inventory and situational awareness of where things are, how things live, what are the most riskiest parts of your organization. But probably most important is prioritization. You can always engineer yourself to death in trying to secure something or trying to implement every kind of tool. Figuring out what's the most important and prioritizing that in a smart and reasonable way is probably the best thing here. And what I always do is start with my adversaries. If we can understand who our adversaries are, how they plan and operate, what their goals and motivations are, what their resources and constraints are, we'll be able to understand which adversaries we're likely to see, what types of attacks we're likely to see, what those attacks will look like. And then we can use that information to not only figure out what the next best controls to build are, what next technologies to build are, but also how effective those controls are going to be against the specific adversaries that we expect to see.
Yeah. Wow. I love that. I love the idea of starting with adversaries. That's super helpful. So one last question for Noah before we wrap up here. So Noah, you talked a little bit about a lot of hand-holding for end users to increase adoption of a password manager, but what are other things that you do at InMotion Hosting and that other organizations can do to help promote a security-focused culture?
Well, it's got to be a part of the conversation for everybody involved, in my opinion. We train the importance and effects of security across the organization, which I think should be one of the standard. We don't really shame users for mistakes per se. We've had a moment where a staff member will click a phishing link and they'll go, I don't know what to do here. And we just have to treat those. And the worst thing that can happen is you've got your user base afraid to report that they made a mistake.
Yeah, that's great. I love that, and such a great way to have open communication when things like that do happen. Well, thank you both for joining me today on this panel. A lot of really great insights. So I know the audience at home, if you're tuning in, I know you're all muted, but if we could give Julian and Noah a round of applause, that would be great. I will assume you're all clapping very loudly at home. So thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Noah, and thanks, Julian.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Sure.